friends! In today's video, I'm challenging myself to learn as much Japanese as I can in the next 30 days. You see, in a little over a month, I'm gonna be moving to Japan, which is super exciting. But the thing is, my current Japanese skills are lacking. Like, I took a semester back in college, but I've long since forgotten most of it. And even though I've picked up various words from like watching anime, I can't just go around Japan saying stuff like nani and baka, you know? And my goal for the end of the month is to see if I can pass the JLPT N5, which is a standard basic proficiency test for Japanese. Alright, so to start the challenge, I thought it'd be fun to take a practice exam like right now, just to get a baseline and see how much there is to improve. So the JLPT test is supposed to take about an hour and a half to complete, but let's just say I did not need that long. Alright guys, well it turns out that you kind of need to read Japanese in order to take this test, and since I can't, I feel like I didn't want to waste any more time and I just gave up. But it turns out that this test is indeed multiple choice, so hey, even if you guess completely at random, you'll probably get at least like a 25-ish%. So let's just say that for my pre-evaluation, I got a 25%. Incredible. So I spent some time today studying the best way to learn Japanese, and here's my game plan. Step 1, learn the alphabets. Step 2, go through a grammar textbook that I conveniently already have. And step 3 is to do language immersion, aka reading manga in Japanese or watching anime. I promise I'm not looking for an excuse, it's actually supposed to be really helpful. So the first thing we're gonna learn on this challenge is the Japanese alphabets. And yes, I said alphabets plural because Japanese has 3. Hiragana, katakana, and kanji, and apparently you do have to learn all of them. The first and most basic alphabet is hiragana. It's used for native Japanese words and grammar. And since I did study some Japanese in the past, this was mostly just review for me. Okay, well the good thing is I didn't lose all of the knowledge that I got back in college. And yeah, I can mostly read like the hiragana now, although very slowly. Well, one alphabet down, time for the next. Unfortunately though, I have never learned like any katakana before, so this one will not be quite as easy. Katakana is used for foreign words, stuff like kohi for coffee or konbini for convenience store. And I started learning with the tactic of stare at the chart and try to memorize it, but I quickly realized this was not very effective, so instead I switched to an app that quizzed me on each letter. And it turned out this was way more effective than staring. Alright, well that was a pretty good 30-minute session. I learned up to nani nune no, but I think if I try to cram like any more shapes into my head, I will not learn any of it. So instead it is time for grammar. Yes, I know I sound super excited, but actually grammar is very exciting because it's how you actually make sentences. And with that, I dove straight into genki, the holy grail of Japanese self-study textbooks. So in chapter 1, I basically learned how to say X is Y. So, watashi wa Stella desu. I am Stella. Pen desu. This thing is a pen. Although now that I mention it, I feel like it's actually kind of more confusing in English because it's like sometimes you use I am Stella, sometimes it's like this is a pen, and sometimes it's like you are a person. But basically, yeah, I learned how to say something exists, which is very cool. Textbook desu. So aside from learning the alphabet and grammar rules, you also need vocabulary. You know, actually knowing words. Kinda important. But on this front, thankfully, my years of watching anime was really coming in handy. It turns out my brain has somehow absorbed various vocab words without me fully realizing it. Probably what listening to literally thousands of hours of anime does to you. Anyhow, after a few more days of studying katakana and reading through genki. Okay, so today is day 6 and I think it's time for a progress report because I have officially learned all of the katakana. Definitely I have not mastered them, but at the very least I can like identify them, albeit very, very slowly. On the grammar side though, things have been a little bit more challenging. I feel like it's really easy to just read the pages of genki, but a lot harder to actually recall it and like have it actually stick in your memory. You know what I mean? It's just really not working for me that well. Okay, so I was trying to find some alternatives to genki online, and I found this cute little app called marumori. I feel like it looks really interesting because it kind of gamifies learning Japanese, and I don't know, I love games, so I'm gonna give it a shot and see how it goes. And I found that I really enjoyed using marumori. Turns out tricking my brain with video game mechanics really works. Rather than just reading the textbook, it felt like I was truly making progress as I learned new sentence structures and leveled up. So one of the things that I really like about marumori is how there's an app. So like instead of just wasting time doom scrolling on my phone, I can learn a bit of Japanese, you know? It's actually very convenient. Like sometimes it's hard to find the time to really sit down with a textbook at a desk, you know? Hi Pete, you wanna do Japanese with me? No. Also, the app pairs really well with one of my favorite things about marumori, its spaced repetition system. Basically, as you learn new grammar concepts and vocab words, it'll add a new flashcard to your list. And then marumori changes the frequency of how often it shows you that card based on how well you know the concept. So if you get it right, it shows it to you less frequently because you know it, and if you get it wrong, it shows it more often so that you can learn it. This way, I know that I'm not just cramming stuff into my brain, I'm actually learning it long term. And after a few more days of learning, it was time to check in on my progress. Japanese is hard. Okay, so today is day 10, which puts me at approximately 1/3 of the way through the challenge. And I feel like I've learned a lot, like evidently at least 88 vocabulary and 10 grammar topics. But to be honest with you, I have kind of fallen behind. Like, I had a really busy weekend, and even if I didn't have a busy weekend, I feel like I've come to realize that 45 vocabulary or whatever in a single day plus 4 grammar topics is just way too hard to like actually internalize. So yeah, this challenge is turning out to be harder than I thought, but I am really enjoying my marumori time, so I think I'm just gonna try to lock in and see if I can catch up, you know? Since I was a bit less busy these upcoming days, I was feeling really motivated to try my best to catch up. After all, if I wanted to try living in Japan, I feel like it was very important to me to try to learn as much Japanese as possible. You know, to be able to interact with society. Like, at the very least, I was hoping to be at an N5 level, which is literally the lowest bar for proficiency. So I kept on studying. And thankfully, marumori did its best to make the language learning process enjoyable as well. One thing that I really like about marumori is how it tries to be funny. Like, look at this great example sentence.
私が行きます。KR KR 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 KR
So helpful.
KR 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 KR.
Anyhow, in more serious matters, I learned about verbs and how to make them present tense or past tense, adjectives and how to make them positive or negative. And Japanese has this whole thing about having different ways to say stuff in polite or casual forms too. And I'll admit, it was a lot to try to learn. Thankfully, marumori has some conjugation drills to make sure you really understand each word ending, but I'll be honest, this was really quite a struggle for me. Ugh, guys, conjugations are hard. Kiku, nope, kikanai? Yeah, let's go. Okay, we've got miru, you take off the ru, so minai. That's right. I'm honestly more shocked when I get it right than when I get it wrong. Guys, I know I said I would lock in, but I think this challenge is doomed. I've made good progress, you know, but then I zoom out and see that there is so much more to learn in N5, and it's like, wow, that's a little overwhelming. Wait, that's not even the whole map. There's more over here. I'm trying my best, I promise, but it's just a lot. I do feel good about the progress I've made at the very least, even though, yes, I would like to be further, but I guess the brain can only learn so much in a short period of time, you know? Alrighty, well, we are now halfway through the challenge, so I figured it would be a good time to do another N5 practice test. And I feel like I've learned a lot, so hopefully this will go better than the first one.
子供の靴下ありますか?
はい。
And it did go better than the first time. I mean, that was not a very high bar since, you know, I couldn't read anything. But even though I wasn't as far as I hoped in marumori, I was really happy because I could at the very least comprehend the questions now, and I actually knew the answers to some of the questions. But then came the grading process. Okay, so the actual JLPT point system is really confusing. Like, it's super hard to guess how many points you would have gotten because some questions are worth more than others. So instead of trying to give myself some fake points, I read online that a common benchmark for passing N5 is 60%. But since I wanted some wiggle room, I decided to aim for a 70%. After all, C's get degrees, and in this case, hopefully an N5 certification. Okay, honestly speaking, I'm actually feeling better than I was before the exam because even though I haven't made as much progress as I hoped on like marumori and stuff, a 40% is not bad. Okay, it's bad, but like, it's a lot better than 0%, you know? Okay, so I realized while I was taking the practice test yesterday that 1, I very rarely get practice listening to Japanese, and 2, I literally never get practice speaking Japanese. So I was thinking, you know, if I want to learn to speak Japanese, it would be good to practice speaking Japanese, and therefore I've decided to try to look for like an online tutor where I could get some conversation practice. And arguably, listening and speaking are the 2 most actually useful skills if I want to live in Japan, so I knew I needed some more practice. Luckily, there were a lot of tutors available on italki who all seemed to have pretty good reviews. And since I wasn't really sure what I was looking for, I went with the most scientific method possible, randomly picking a tutor who had availability the next day. Alright, I'm about to start my first lesson on italki. I'm a little bit nervous, but hopefully it'll be fine. But honestly, as soon as I got into the lesson, my fears disappeared. My tutor was super kind and patient, and I spoke more Japanese than I ever had before, which to be clear was pretty much zero. And I gotta say, speaking with someone else is really different than studying on your own. Like, I was actually having fun putting together all those grammar and vocab things I learned into real sentences. はい、ここで。いいえ、もう、私、ひらがなはすごく遅いです。持ち帰りで。持ち帰りで。Okay, that was actually really fun. Like, my teacher was super nice and encouraging, and I just had a lot of fun, like, practicing listening and speaking to Japanese, because ultimately that's what's most useful anyways, right? Over the next few days, I continued to self-study grammar, and I also started trying lessons with different tutors just to see what kind of teaching style worked best for me. I found that some teachers had lessons that were more focused on general conversation practice, while others focused more on honing a specific grammar skill or a sentence pattern. So I decided to try a second teacher just to see how like different teachers teach, and I actually really liked her style a lot. I felt like it was a bit more structured than the first one that I tried, and I appreciated that, you know, as a kind of noob who's trying to learn grammar and stuff. I'm honestly really enjoying italki though as a whole, and I think I might stick with this teacher and book more lessons with her in the future because I had a good time. Okay, so tutoring has been really helpful in improving my like speaking and listening skills, but the thing is, it's not free. And so I've also been looking for like other methods to improve my listening skills. And one thing I've heard is really helpful is language immersion. Basically, by listening to Japanese content like podcasts or anime, your brain subconsciously recognizes the grammar patterns you've been learning and vocab words and stuff. So I'm gonna give it a try and see how it goes. Was this maybe just an excuse to watch anime? Possibly, but I found it really helpful to actively listen to the words people were saying, and in addition to recognizing vocab words I already knew, I also sometimes picked up new words as well. Though I will admit, sometimes my studying did get distracted by the plot of the shows. 相当な人気のようだ. Ninki, I know that word. Me too. Okay, so lately I have been really enjoying the Japanese immersion practice. Obviously, watching anime is fun, but I don't actually count that as practice time. What I do count though is like the really basic beginner Japanese podcasts where they talk about, you know, everyday conversation topics. And I feel like those are really nice to multitask with just because I don't need to fully pay attention to them and I can still kind of learn. So it's really helpful for like busy days when I don't have time to like sit down and purely study for an hour, you know? Okay, so today is day 24, and that means I have about 1 week left in my personal challenge to try to pass the JLPT N5 in 30 days. And I know the JLPT isn't like the perfect test for measuring everything I care about, but at the end of the day, it is still like the standardized Japanese proficiency exam, so I would really like to pass if possible, you know? And while I was taking the exam, I could feel the improvement. Like, I definitely think the language immersion and tutoring sessions helped a lot, especially with the listening section. Okay, so here are my scores, and honestly, I'm feeling pretty good about my progress. Like for grammar, reading, vocab, I'm almost at 70%. Not quite, but almost. And even though my listening still needs work, I have a week, you know, I'm improving. Maybe we'll get there, hopefully, we'll see. At this point, I felt like I had my study systems locked in. I knew I was making good progress, so rather than changing things up, it was time to commit and stick to what was working. I learned more grammar and vocab via marumori, doing little practice drills throughout the day. Every few days, I took classes with Hikaru-sensei and got some practice listening and speaking. Whenever I was bored, I would immerse myself by listening to Japanese podcasts and watching anime. Nothing fancy, no big changes, just consistency. And honestly, I feel like I learned a lot over the last few days of my challenge. Alrighty guys, it is now day 30, which means it is time to take one final JLPT N5 exam and see if I can pass. And soon enough, an hour and a half breezed by and I completed my final practice exam. So I just graded my exam and here are my scores. I got a 73% on the language skills section and a 71% on listening, which means to the best of my knowledge, I think that's good enough to pass. And yeah, I know it might seem weird to like celebrate 70%, but you know, C's get degrees, right? And honestly, I am really proud of myself for completing the challenge and achieving my goal. Like, even though I'll admit, I know I still have a really long ways to go in terms of actually learning all of the N5 grammar, I still feel like I learned so much over the course of the past month. It's crazy what you can do when you set your mind to it, you know? I will say though, the JLPT does not have a speaking portion, so instead I'm just gonna try my best to do like a self-introduction here, just to practice speaking a bit. Oh my god, I'm so nervous. はじめまして、私の名前はステラです。私の趣味はアニメを見るのことと YouTube 動画を作るのこと。最近日本語を勉強しました。でも話すはまだ少し難しいです。Okay, that's it. Back to English. I know I still have a really, really long way to go in terms of speaking, but hey, being able to speak anything is leagues better than where I was before. Anyhow, even though this challenge is over, I'm obviously still gonna continue learning to study Japanese, and I'm really excited to put it all to good use over the next few months while I'm living in Japan. So yeah, if you'd like to follow me on those adventures, be sure to subscribe. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching as always. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you next time. じゃあまたね。